Hello and welcome to another Tunisian crochet tutorial. This tutorial is going to be slightly different. We are not going to be I'm not going to be showing you a specific stitch or stitch combination. I'm going to let you know or explain to you how I keep the edges of my work relatively straight. Several things that you can do to improve the final look of your project, and I'm going to be talking about this. So first I would start with choosing the right size of your hook for the yarn that you are working with. So for example, this is worsted weight yarn. It's Women's Institute yarn. It's 100% acrylic worsted weight, and on the label it says that the recommended hook size is 5.5 millimeters. And usually I use the 6.5 millimeter hook for this. Now this will create quite dense fabric. When I do my Tunisian crochet, unless I do lace, I like to have quite dense fabric. But for this yarn, it wouldn't hurt to go maybe to 7 millimeter hook to create a little bit more drape. And if you want really flowy fabric, I would probably go to maybe even 8 millimeter hook on this one, and it would still create a beautiful piece with some nice drape. Okay, so this is the first point that I would like to emphasize, is to match the hook size with your yarn. That is very important. The next thing is in terms of the stitches that you use. Some stitches curl up more. For example, Tunisian knit stitch curls up very much. Tunisian simple stitch curls up very much. But there are others, for example, Tunisian reverse or Tunisian pearl, that don't curl up so much. And you can use it to your advantage, either by creating a border on your project using these stitches or combination of these stitches, or incorporate these stitches into your design, so that they are part of the design. They are not a border, but that helps you to keep your edges straight. What I tend to do in my projects, I design a few pieces where I used ribbing. So in the ribbing you can use a combination of 1 Tunisian knit, 1 Tunisian pearl, or 1 Tunisian pearl and 2 Tunisian knit stitches that create beautiful ribbing. Or I designed a blanket, Moon and Stars blanket, which is a free pattern on my blog, and there I used a border of honeycomb stitch. So honeycomb stitch is a 1-to-1 combination of Tunisian simple and Tunisian pearl stitch, so you can have that as a part of your design. Okay, the next thing that I would like to mention is blocking. I block all my pieces, no matter what type of yarn I use, even if I use acrylic, because I know that some crocheters don't block their acrylic yarn, but I block everything with steam. I don't prefer to use wet blocking, I like steam blocking. So I pin my piece very tightly. I pay particular attention to edges. So for example, this piece is blocked, and when I was blocking here around the edges to kind of define the edges, I used a lot more pins than along the sides. Okay, and I'm going to insert a picture here of the same swatch unblocked, so you will see that it was very much curled up. There was lots of inconsistency in terms of the shape. Well, once I pinned it down, once I steamed it, it straightened up the project beautifully. The stitches kind of came alive, and this is what I created. This swatch here hasn't been blocked, as you can see, so you can see that here along the sides there's still a little bit of curl. But even if you didn't want to block this piece, it doesn't make the piece looking too big. For example, this swatch didn't need blocking necessarily because it would be curling up. However, I did block it because I wanted to even out the stitches. So blocking helps not only with your curling, but it evens out the stitches. While you crochet, the fabric could curl up a little bit on the inside. Maybe in some part of your project you work a little bit tighter than the other. It happens often when you don't work your piece in one session, which sometimes is not possible if you're working on a bigger project. So on some days you might feel a little bit tenser, so you crochet a little bit tenser even with the same hook size and the same yarn. Okay, so that would be in terms of blocking. And the last point is it depends also on how you start your project and what kind of stitches you are using at the beginning, how you treat the beginning of your row and the end of your row and the final row, your bind off row. So for this, I'm just going to show you the methods that I use. You will see me using this in my tutorials. So for those who watch my tutorials, this is not a novelty. But if this is the first video that you are watching and you just want some tips and tricks on how to keep your Tunisian crochet look nice and neat, this might be something that you haven't heard from me before. Okay, so I'm just going to make a small swatch of a few stitches to demonstrate what I use. Okay, when you do your chain, your starting chain, try to keep your chains somehow in the middle, not too loose and not too tight, because as you work your stitches, sometimes you might need a little bit more space for your stitches, sometimes you might need a little bit less. The fabric is going to kind of constrict, so you don't want to have a sloppy chains or something that is too tight that is going to pull on your project. Okay, so you keep your chains nice and loose but not too loose. And now I work into the back bump of your chain stitches. Okay, if you work into these top loops, it is also possible to work into these top loops or into the bottom loops, but it's my personal preference to work into the back bumps, because what it does, it brings out the chains forward, creating rather nice and neat bottom edge. So as you can see, this is what you're going to have at the bottom of your project, which is relatively nicely looking. Another option is to use the foundation cord. This is something which I used for this swatch here, if you can see here. So this also gave my project a very nice and neat bottom edge. If this is something that you would like to see how to do this, let me know, and I might make a short tutorial about this one. Okay, so this would be in terms of starting your project. Now we're just going to work the basic return pass or standard return pass, which brings us to the beginning of project and another point. Okay, so as we work our project, this very first loop, which is on your hook, tends to elongate, and that would give you a sloppy edge. So you just need to make sure that when you start your row, you keep it quite tight. You don't let it elongate on you, otherwise it would not look as nice. Okay, we're just going to work some Tunisian simple stitches here. Okay, and as you work along the length of your row, you can also adjust the size of your loops, so you can kind of even them out by pulling on them once they're on the hook. Okay, so we are now getting to the end of our row, and this is another, brings us to another point. So here I work under both of these loop at the end of your row, into the right and left loop. So I work under both loops, you yarn over and pull up a loop, and that's the final stitch in your row. As you work in this, your row in this way, it gives you nice and neat edge there. Sorry, this is how I started my project. Okay, so as you can see on this side, working under the both loops gives you this nice neat edge where the stitches are even length, and somehow it matches the beginning of your project as well, as you can see, and this side as well. So the sides kind of match. So that's your how you work your edges, how to make sure that your edges look nice and neat. Okay, so I'm just going to work standard return pass. Again, if I'm going to work another row, I need to make sure that this loop at the beginning is nice and tight. Going to work another row, after which I'll show you how I bind off my projects. Okay, again, I'm going to work under both loops, then right, and now we are working standard return pass. Okay, and now if I wanted to finish this project, this mini swatch, as you can see, the last row is not defined yet, because when you work your Tunisian crochet, the consecutive row that you work defines the stitches in the row below. So we need to work bind off row to give these stitches kind of their shape and to know what they are. So there are many ways how to work your bind off row, but what I tend to do, I tend to use the same method, because what I found, for example, if I bind off Tunisian knit stitches, working into Tunisian knit stitches, that increases the curl on the top. It pulls the stitches forward and it makes the curl even worse. So I work all my bind off rows in the same way. Okay, so how you do, what to do is you need to work the stitch as if you worked Tunisian simple stitch. So you go into the stitch from right to left, yarn over, pull up a loop, and you work through the loop that is already on the hook. So while, and you repeat this to the end of the row. So while in normal Tunisian, when you work your forward pass, the number of stitches or loop on your hook increases. When you do your bind off row, you keep only one loop on your hook. Okay, like so. And now we are getting to the end of the row. So we're still going to work the edge stitch the same way under both loops. You pull up a loop and then you work it through the loop that is already on the hook. And as you can see, this gives you the look of your foundation chain, of the foundation row. So the edges match, they're nice and neat. So I explained several ways how to improve the look of your Tunisian crochet project, how to somehow help with the curl, how to keep your edges nice and neat. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.